Good morning. My name is James Reynolds. And we're here at the Great Ponds Gallery in beautiful downtown Lakeville, Massachusetts, right in the same building as the Lakeville Public Library. And I'm having just shy of a 2-month one-man exhibit here. And I've got 28 plein air landscapes on the walls at the moment, and that goes through about the third week of August 2015. I got started painting, I got started drawing as a child, like every child I think we've all met, and it just always became something that wound up on the margins of notebooks or on, telephone doodling and crayon sketches and all of that. As I got into teen years in college, started taking art classes at school, and just kind of developed the interest kind of just wouldn't go away, and so I started to experiment with different media and so forth, oil pastels and graphite and all of that. And in the meantime, I went out and had a living, and continued to, and pounded away at work, and put all of my art interest as that little thing in the back. The oils were probably the last thing I arrived at, and as was painting on canvas. So I started with pencils and pen and ink and pastels and watercolors and acrylics, and I've exhausted everything else. The beauty of oils, unlike other media, is that there are so many techniques and approaches and ways to do it. You can take straight out of the tube paint and just use that. You can thin it with turp and get a very turpentine and get a very thin wash that's almost absorbed by the, wicked into the canvas, and that creates one look. Out of the tube paint on top of that creates a more impasto-y look. Some people say oil takes too long. Some people prefer that it took longer. But there are additives that you can put into your oil paints to accelerate the drying time or to slow down, to retard it. And then to actually put it on the canvas or on a panel, you can typically, I would start with large brushes and work out values, composition, lights and darks. And then as I go through the painting, also starting thin, start to move into smaller brushes, progressively smaller brushes, and thicker paint, and more so thicker on the lighter values than the darker values. But it's not just brushes. Palette knife creates some incredible textures. It almost looks like swabs of butter across your painting, and it really creates a depth to it. This is really something where you start broad and move to a more specific thing. And all along the way, you're trying to block in big things and then move to smaller ideas and refine and refine. And so you're creating an area of darks and an area of lights. First, you've got the composition. This one kind of took me back here, and the water goes around the back. The trees in the distance actually become whitish blue as they recede versus the trees up front. And you can tell the morning light's coming this way. You've got the yellows in the tops, the darks in the water, and then over here these lily pads just lit up from the sunlight that's coming through at this angle. And this one in particular, lately I've been doing a lot of smoother paintings, more refined, more finished. This one was done with a palette knife, largely, and instead of painting in actual lily pads, took the overall look of the pads, and this is to be out there and see this. The technique is to really do a lot of squinting when you're looking at the scene, and that just kind of simplifies the values and the shapes, and you can paint very broadly, very quickly by doing that. And so, this is kind of an impressionistic approach. As you get up close, it just looks like clumps of paint. When you stand back across the room, it looks like a painting. This is very thick. As you move around, that also throws shadows beneath that. So it creates a trick to your eyes as you're looking at the painting. There's a lot of the paintings I'd prefer to get out early in the morning. My head's clear, I don't have a lot of distractions, little things buzzing. But more importantly, the light in the morning, or even the afternoon, but especially in the morning, is so much, it creates so much more compositional interest. The lights and the darks, you know, if you're midday and you're looking at a tree in a field, you know, it's kind of flat light, it doesn't really, you know, it's a tree, and that's fine. Trees are beautiful, but a morning tree with the shadows coming out from behind it and the sunlight yellowing the top of it has just such more of a sculptural effect to it, to view it, and then to either photograph it or to put it on canvas. It's just a far more interesting tree. And that's true with architecture and boats and expansive landscapes. Anytime you can get the morning light or the late afternoon light raking across it, it just creates such a far more interesting thing to view. And also the color of the light is significantly different, not only through the seasons, but especially in the early morning or the late afternoon. And my preference for early morning to late afternoon is in the early morning, the light will change as you go forward, but you're not going to lose the light. So if things go really awry and a 2-hour painting becomes a 4-hour painting, I'm not out there in the dark. And at sunset, the light effects are beautiful, but they seem to change much more quickly. And of course the light disappears, and then you're out there in the dark with your paint box and mosquitoes and whatnot. Painting from life, for me at least, is a much truer way of bringing in what's actually there. You will always get a truer read on colors, a truer read on value, and when you're standing there for 2 hours, say, or 3 hours doing a painting, and ideally it's in a place where you're not getting a lot of distractions, you really start to ground to the spot, and you become aware of other things, like the sound of dragonflies buzzing around your head, which you'll never see in the painting, but somehow that creates it becomes part of the painting in almost a intuitive or a spiritual level of some sort. There are an awful lot of potential paintings out there, firstly, to find in landscapes. And so in that sense, I suppose, it's easier to find a landscape model than it is to find a human model who will sit for you in one pose for 3 hours. I also like to be outside. I can't stand being inside. I don't care what the season is. I just want to be outside. There are probably 3 main areas outside that I paint in. One is the Cape, one is Vermont, central Vermont, and the other is in this Lakeville, Middleborough, Halifax, Plymouth area. And the latter, because I live here, and if I've only got a couple of hours on any particular day, I can get there and get back and address all my daily responsibilities. How I find a particular site, I kind of have an idea in my mind ahead of time on maybe 3 or 4 places I'd like to go. So if I'm in Vermont for a weekend, I know ahead of time I'm either going to go to this place, I'm going to go to that place, or that place. And then if I wake up and it's raining instead of that beautiful cresting sun, I've got a couple of backup plans for that too. So I kind of already know where I'm going, and it might be based on a place that I like or a concept. Maybe I'm following a different artist for a while and trying to experiment with their style a little bit, so I pick something that would be similar in subject to what they might be doing. And then I'll go take a drive and say, well, it's not quite working today. The color of the sun changes every day. Sometimes you have gold light, sometimes you have white light. Sometimes you have, a couple of weeks ago we had sunset, sunrise, the next sunset, orange. There were a lot of orange in the sky. These are both in the area. This is on the Middleborough, just out of Middleborough on the Halifax side. This is a big piece of field. This was a rainy day last June, just a year ago. And I had a couple of different artists in mind when I was doing this. One being Richard Schmidt from Vermont, and the other is a Dutch living painter named Roos Schuring in the Netherlands. And so I kind of I'd been looking at both of their work for a bit, and kind of got them in my head and couldn't get either one out. So this is a palette from Schmidt, and sort of a style from Schuring. And a lot of her work layers these tones, and she'll do water in very thick paint. This is thinner sections, but thick paint as well. And then Schmidt's palette is a lot of this is Rembrandt paints, transparent oxide red. It's very similar to burnt sienna, but it has a little more transparency to it and a little more malleability, I suppose we'll call it. You can do it very thin and get a nice glazing effect. You can do it thick and get a nice dark burnt sienna effect. And Viridian, which is a beautiful green that it comes out of the tube dark like a phthalo green or a Windsor green, and can be thinned if you cut it with cadmium yellow or cad yellow lemon. You get these really bright early spring growth highlights. And so those colors and that thickness, and this is water, this is a puddle, and that's part of the impressionistic approach, is to squint and then get those globs just kind of jabbed in there. And when you're right up close, they look like paint that's been jabbed in there. And when you go across the room, hopefully, it looks like a landscape. This one is not too far from it. This is in that same area of the Cumberland Farms field. This is on the Middleborough side rather than the Halifax side. And this is iconic New England, and something that hopefully will have some preservation attempts in near term to save these buildings. This is the endangered species of architecture right now, these beautiful old barns. Again, this was a snow painting I did this winter at the end of January, after we made it through this very lovely January with no snow. We had one little snow, and I said, I better get out there and get the snow, because we're not going to have any snow this year. And little did I know we'd be getting the blizzards we got. But this was the first snow painting this year. And you can see these ochres and burnt siennas. This is the straw that's coming through the light, maybe 5 or 6 inches of snow. And again, it's darks and lights. To get these drawings, it's really about understanding where the darks are and where the lights are. After that, the drawing is almost secondary to it, and even the color. These are pretty accurate colors for this day, but it's the darks and the lights. If you can get those darks where they belong accurately here, and then the lights accurately, and then throw in these shadows, these little detail shadows, those are darks. And I took a workshop with a prominent painter, nationally recognized painter, a couple of years ago, and the one thing he kept saying was, value is drawing. That's the truest thing I know about it. That's the best thing I've learned so far. Value is drawing. So you can clearly identify your darks, your lights, your darkest dark, your lightest light, and then from there figure out where your midtones are. And every time you put your brush on, you have to know if you're putting it in shadow or you're putting it in sunlight. And if you can get that understood, color and drawing are just secondary to that. It really is about the value. And that's a hard lesson to learn, because when we start out looking at paintings, we say, wow, those colors are great. And that's what we see, where our mind is programmed to identify anything with color as the right color. And it doesn't really matter if it's the right color. If there were an orange sunset, all this thing would be in orange tones. But so long as the darks were in the right place and the lights are in the right place, it works. I could paint this whole thing blue. Picasso spent years painting all of his paintings in blue. and they all worked because they were accurate in value. So what I would say to aspiring artists of any age, but especially younger people, who are probably being told that you should be responsible and get a job and put all of this creative stuff behind you, I would say that's partly true. You should be responsible and get a job, but by no means should you bury any ambition you might have. And this is, people will assume that this is about talent. This is about skill. It's about learning skills and applying those skills, and it's about having a sense of wonder and a need to grow mentally and probably spiritually all the time. There's never a point you're going to get to and be done, hopefully, and this is all about that. And as good a painter as any are, they, I guarantee you, are still learning tricks. I know 70-year-old painters that have been painting their whole life professionally, and they're still experimenting, and they're still going forward with ideas. So from the Great Ponds Gallery in Lakeville, I'm James Reynolds. You can follow me on Facebook, and the easiest way to get there would probably be to click over from my website, newenglandpainter.com, and if you just click like on the Facebook page, I'll continue to post upcoming events and paintings as they come available, and thank you for watching.